Good morning. This is Dr. Solomon, and today's topic is multicultural literature. And what we want to think about is why it is so important that we include multicultural literature in our classrooms. Why is it important? Because it expands horizons, okay? It lets kids who have exposure to people and places and ideas that maybe in real life they would never have a chance to be exposed to. So even if people a lot of times think, well, multiculturalism, that's for, minority kids. Well, no, it's for everybody because it's important that Anglo kids, sometimes they're in schools and it's all Anglo kids or maybe just one little black kid who, whoever he is. And it's important for them to see maybe a perspective of a black child or Native American child. Okay, so that's real important. So it's not just for minority children; it's for everybody. Just to expand horizons and let people know what ideas are out there that might be different and what things that we can connect to, even though these people are different. Another thing that it does is that multicultural literature builds bridges between people. So, within that book, you can see, oh, wow, you know, even though this person was different or lived in a different time or has a different perspective than me, I can understand, what he's feeling. And maybe even I would react the same way. So that's another thing that multicultural literature does, it builds bridges. One thing that's real important, it affirms identity. Kids need to see themselves in literature. One thing that I did not because out of meanness or anything else, it was basically out of ignorance. I didn't have a lot of books. Okay, I'm just going to say it. I didn't have any books that had Latino children as part of the book. And I look back now, I'm thinking, how could I do that? I had so many Latino children in my classes over the years because I taught in Texas. And yet I didn't have, you know, they were not able to see themselves reflected in what they read and in materials that are in the classroom. And that is so important for kids. Okay. Let's see. Now, there are different kinds of multicultural books. And when we think of multiculturalism, if this wasn't, if we had more time to spend on this, I would tell you that multiculturalism isn't just ethnicity and race. It's religion, it's gender identity, it is handicaps, it's all kinds of differences are included, it's poverty, and wealth differences. So all of those things are part of what it means to have a multicultural perspective. For this instance, we're looking mostly at race, but an ethnicity, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what multiculturalism is. So when you're thinking about that and you're thinking about it for your future classroom, make sure you have books about girls that may not be just stereotypical ideas about girls, because that's important too. But for this class, we're going to look at folklore and legends. When we look at the different types of legends, Native American legends, that's a really important part to have, a part of the things that should be in your class. Holiday books, when you do the Christmas Around the World celebration and you include different types of books, that's important. Biographies of different people could be considered multicultural books. The big, you always do the Martin Luther King thing and you read a biography of him. Books about other countries and historical information about them. Books about the ethnic experience in America. Historical, like there was internment camps and, inside the civil rights movement, that kind of thing. So there's lots of different types of multicultural books that you should include if you want to have a well-balanced classroom library. Now, when you think about selecting books for your classroom, you need to think about, really evaluate their value, okay? And that's something we'll talk about more in class. But for one thing, is it just culturally accurate? When you look at the book, there's a book called The Day Elvis Came to Town, and it's set in Mississippi in the 1950s. And in the book, there is an interracial marriage, and that's not something that was even legal back then. So that's not something that could have happened. So that's when we're talking about, is this culturally accurate? Does it have really good details? Is it specific? Is it right? So when you think of something like a book called, what's the name of the book? It is called When Africa Was Home. It home Africa. Well, Africa's a continent. There's lots of different countries in Africa, so that's not really accurate to what we really want kids to understand. Um, is it authentic? Are things really authentic in the way things, or is it kind of stereotypical? All right, and you'll have a chance in class to work with that a little bit later. Um, is the inclusion of the minority group important to the story? I mean, you might have a book and you walking along and uh, there's 5 white kids and then there just happens to be a little black kid. Okay, well okay, that's fine, A for effort, but I don't know if we can really say, oh, I've got a multicultural book here because there's a little black face in this crowd. Okay, so that's something to think about. All right. Now, one thing I wanted to get to that's real important is James Banks' 4 ways to integrate multiculturalism into the curriculum. And one of the best ways, again, to do that is through books, okay? Because you can bring a whole world into your classroom through books, of course. And there are 4 ways to do it. And all 4 are important. They just have different levels of, they're just different levels. So you're going to see that. The first one is the contributions approach. And everybody does this. I did it as a teacher, where you do a unit on George Washington Carver. So here's the book, George Washington Carver, called The Peanut Wizard. Okay, and you read about him, and then just like in my class, you make peanut butter and everybody has a good time. And then in February or January in Chinese New Year, you read a book about the Chinese New Year. Okay, and you learn about it. And so when you think about the contributions approach, you think about you're sharing the contributions of that culture to the United States and to the world, okay? George Washington Carver was part of the African American experience that contributed to who we are today. The Lion Dancer, Chinese New Year, you're talking about the contributions of that culture to our, our lives. And it's important, but it's very low level ways of including multiculturalism into your classroom. So a little higher up is called the additive approach. So you're not just, it's a holiday and you're reading a book about, George Washington Carver, or it's Cinco de Mayo, so you read Too Many Tamales. You're not just doing that. You're taking an actual unit, okay? You have added something to the curriculum. So that's called the additive approach, okay? And let's say you do a unit on legends. So your curriculum doesn't really change much, but you've added books about Native American legends, okay? And you read those. So this is The Legend of the Bluebonnet by Tommy DePaulo. Or you could do a women's history. Maybe in March, you're going to add to your curriculum a unit on women's history. So here's a book about Bessie Coleman, who was a pilot. It's called Nobody Owns the Sky. And so along with other books, you do this unit on women, important women, okay? So that's one thing, that's additive. Or you're talking about the civil rights movement. Again, this is something that I've done too. And you read a couple of books about, here's Ruby Bridges, a book about Ruby Bridges. I love this book. It's a beautiful book. It's a biography. I guess it's considered an autobiography, but she didn't really write it herself, I don't think. Unless she had help. I guess it is an autobiography. It says by Ruby Bridges right there. All right. So you add your unit on the civil rights movement. Here's another one. This is a story of Rosa Parks. If the Bus Could Talk. It's by Faith Ringgold, who's a very famous artist. And it tells the story of Rosa Parks. And it also, gives the, perspective of what the bus was thinking and saying at the time. Kind of a neat concept. It's falling out here. Okay. So that's 2 different kinds. Those are the 2 lowest levels of ways that you can include multiculturalism in your curriculum. You can do it by the contributions. Oh, we're going to honor the contributions of this culture. Okay, and then there's the additive approach. It's a little higher level where you're taking a whole approach. A whole unit, and you're adding it to the curriculum. You see how that's a little bigger? Okay. The third level is the transformation approach. Okay, I don't have a lot of examples of that right here with me, but one of my favorites is this story called Encounter by Jane Yolen. and it is about a story about Christopher Columbus coming to America. And we all know that story, but this is from the perspective of the Native Americans. It's from the perspective of a Native American child. Okay? So when you are transforming the curriculum, you are looking at things from different perspectives. Okay? Um, Here is a picture. I love this book. It's a beautiful book. All right. So, and that's a little different than the other two. So the contributions approach and the additive approach don't really necessarily change the curriculum. But when you really want to do a transformational approach, then every time that you think about something in history or something that's happening, you think about the different perspectives and you present those to kids. So here is a perspective on Columbus Day that maybe is not the one that necessarily that we all know already. Okay? And so you kind of expose kids to all the different perspectives and then let them kind of decide what's true and what's not true, and let them understand the nuances of history. So that's the transformational approach, and it's all about perspectives, including everyone's perspectives. Okay? And that's pretty high level. You're really changing the curriculum when you're thinking about that. And the last one, the highest level of multicultural integration, is the social action approach, okay? And this is so important, you are empowering kids to make a difference, okay? Freire is a researcher, and he's very famous, and he talks about teaching kids to not be the objects of history, but to be the subjects of history, to make a difference. So one of my very favorite books is called Something Beautiful. It's got this beautiful child on the front. Okay, don't have time to read it, of course, but it's a little girl who sees horrible things in her environment. Here's somebody who's written "die" on basically her front stoop. And here she's got the poor person living outside on the outside her home under a piece of plastic. And there are places that she has to run by in her neighborhood, like, oh my gosh, this is not a safe spot, And so in her story, she, at school, she's learning about beautiful, and what it means and what is something beautiful. So she goes throughout her neighborhood and asks the people, well, what is something beautiful for you? I live in this horrible place where people, are writing, die on the walls, and, homeless people and places that just aren't safe. Well, where's my something beautiful? Okay. And then, so at the very end, I'll tell you the ending. Okay. The very end, she takes action. Okay, here she is scrubbing the dye from her door. Okay, so it's not just that things happen to you. You can take action, and that's something that, if you're really wanting to change your curriculum, what are ways that we can use books to have kids take action and make a difference, and encourage them to make a difference. One story that I think is kind of encourages social action, and this is a book of poetry about a little boy who is an ESL learner. He's trying to learn English, and it's stories about his experiences. And I think, reading these little poems, one is called Dirty Words. It says, I wish my language didn't sound like dirty English words. The grown-ups frown when I speak Spanish, and the kids laugh. Okay? And I think, this is also a perspective book, right? So you have that kid that's different in your class, and he speaks Spanish. He's learning English. He doesn't know it yet. Here's his perspective. This is the way he sees things. Do you want to change things for him? Do you want to make a difference for him? Okay, so that is the idea of social action, and that is so important, that we want kids to understand that they are active, that they have agency, that there's something that they can make a difference in this world, because that's what makes future leaders, and that's what makes a world that will change, is when we have people that think, I can make a difference. All right, so that's all I have for right now. See you next time.